something amazing happened today that you don't normally see. You definitely don't see in the Senate often. Senator John McCain actually said that out of his mouth, he set it up and then he delivered that Kentucky Senator Rand Paul was working for Vladimir Putin. I want you to listen to the clips, and then we'll go from there. Listen in.
If there is objection, and I note the senator from Kentucky on the floor, I will say before I read this, if there is objection, you are achieving the objectives of Vladimir Putin. You're achieving the objectives of trying to dismember this small country that has already been the subject of attempted coup. I have no idea why anyone would object to this, except that I will say, if they object, they are now carrying out the desires and ambitions of Vladimir Putin, and I do not say that lightly. So, Mr. President,
all right,
I ask unanimous consent that at a time to be determined by the
all right, so that's the first part of the clip. I'll play the second part after I give you a little context. This is over a conversation about the Senate's attempt to pass a treaty which would have allowed Montenegro to join NATO. And so he's setting this up, John McCain clearly on the side of adding Montenegro into NATO. And he's setting it up basically saying if anyone objects to this, then they are doing the bidding of Vladimir Putin. So it's a fallacious argument at best. However, it's fascinating to see two Republican congressmen, or senators rather, go after each other in this manner. So immediately after this section, he begins to issue the motion on the floor that they accept this treaty, or they move this treaty through. And immediately after that, this is what happened. Take a listen in.
Senator from Kentucky.
I object.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President, I note the senator from Kentucky leaving the floor without justification or any rationale for the action that he has just taken. That is really remarkable, that a senator blocking a treaty that is supported by the overwhelming number, perhaps 98 at least, of his colleagues, would come to the floor and object and walk away. And walk away. The only conclusion you can draw when he walks away is he has no argument to be made. He has no justification for his objection to having a small nation be part of NATO that is under assault from the Russians. So I repeat again, the senator from Kentucky is now working for Vladimir Putin. I yield the floor.
I mean, that is a pretty damning accusation. One of the first things that I noticed, that no one threw or hurled Rule 19 at him. If you recall the issue with the hearing on Jeff Sessions and Elizabeth Warren, they censured her, they silenced her because she impugned the character of a sitting senator. They didn't. I mean, John McCain clearly crossed that threshold, and no one issued any type of warning. So that hypocrisy was the very first thing that jumped out. The second thing that jumped out is in general, you know, I'm very curious as to Rand Paul's position on this. He didn't bother to make it clear. He has opposed this same treaty, the acceptance of Montenegro into NATO. He's opposed it previously, and this is why John McCain prefaced his entire statement setting up this fallacious argument that if you oppose this, then you're working for Vladimir Putin, right? That's a load of bull in and of itself. But Rand Paul doesn't bother to offer his justification as to why. I mean, I can imagine that at least a solid argument, whether you agree with it or not, could be the threat, or the perceived threat that Russia would have in the ever-growing size of NATO, right? And the destabilizing effect that would have, and it would cause Russia to escalate and could increase tensions even more. I can see that as whether you agreed or not with it or not, that's an argument. But Rand Paul doesn't bother to offer the argument. He simply objects and then he leaves. And then John McCain goes the distance and says that Rand Paul is now working for Vladimir Putin. I've never heard that type of inter-party argument. I mean, it's fascinating. But McCain's spokesperson, Julie Tarallo, she told Business Insider today, she said, quote, Senator McCain believes that the person who benefits the most from Congress's failure to ratify Montenegro's accession to NATO is Vladimir Putin, whose government has sought to destroy the NATO alliance, erode confidence in America's commitments to its allies, overthrow the duly elected government of Montenegro, and undermine the democratic institution throughout Europe. She went on to say the overwhelming majority of senators who support this treaty, and certainly the people of Montenegro, deserved an explanation from Senator Paul on the Senate floor as to why he sought to prevent this small, brave country from joining in the defense of the free world. So this treaty is at the point now where it needs to be ratified by unanimous consent. Rand Paul, he later on said this. He said it would be, quote, unwise to expand the monetary and military obligations of the United States given the burden of our 20 trillion debt. Really, Rand Paul? This is the first time I'm actually reading this quote. He said, quote, currently, the United States has troops in dozens of countries and is actively fighting in Iraq, Syria, Libya, and Yemen, with the occasional drone strike in Pakistan. To me, that's not a good argument. It's not a good argument because you're going to we can always. Rand Paul uses the debt to justify doing nothing all the time. Like, he's like, oh, the most important thing is that we address this fiscal disaster we have, this debt that's, this country bumpkin. I mean, anyway, I'm sorry. I'm country too, so I can't really clown him. But that cannot be the blanket justification against every single thing to keep us from doing anything. That's his justification against the Affordable Care Act. That's his justification, Anyway. But it's fascinating that this is the statement that he puts out, but it's really bereft of any substance, right? Because the addition of Montenegro into NATO, it's a very small country. First of all, he's acting as though the addition of Montenegro into NATO is going to be I guess a statistically significant increase in the military spending or military commitments to NATO. You got to show me I really want to see that. And I'm not saying I want to see that justified in some evidence. I'm not saying that there are no valid arguments against this, right? I haven't even broached the surface of the nuances of this particular conversation. I am saying that argument really doesn't carry weight. And I'm also saying that John McCain's argument really didn't carry weight. So let's just sit back and watch these two senators from the same party who both have extremely problematic politics and foreign policy positions. Let's sit back and enjoy the fact that they're now accusing each other of being stooges for Vladimir Putin. Oh, man, these are interesting times. I tell you that much.